Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here today. We're talking about the WWE Hall of Fame for Wrestlemania 37 for the class of 2021. I can honestly tell you, to go along with the Molly Holly video that I made, I believe, last week, I really don't understand what they're doing with the WWE Hall of Fame this year. I don't know if they're just going to get the people that they can onto the live Hall of Fame special that they're going to be running. I'm not sure if it's going to be on the WWE Network or if it's going to be on USA. But the word is it's going to be on Tuesday. I don't know what they're doing with last year's WrestleMania 36 inductees, the Bellas, Batista, the NWO. They haven't really come out and said what their plan is or what they're doing with that. But this year, they added Eric Bischoff as a WrestleMania 37 2021 class member. I think this is awesome because honestly, last year when they announced the NWO was going to go in and it was only going to be Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Sean Waltman, 6 going in as the NWO members. I thought that honestly was kind of weird. I know that, Big Bubba Rogers and Mike Wall Street, Buff Bagwell. Well, I'll be honest. Buff Bagwell is like a true blue NWO member. When he joined, he was like the babyface of WCW. When they were, saying, you have so many days, you're either with us or against us. And Buff Bagwell joined. That was a big deal. And although, Buff, was a multi-time tag team champion, I think that honestly being in the NWO, he never was one of those guys that jumped from the NWO back to WCW until the writing was on the wall that the NWO was no more. It helped him. He was a U.S. champion. I'm not sure if he was a TV champion, but I want to say that he was. And just about everything that he did in the NWO, was a higher stature than where he was before. He competed in one of the War Game teams going up against the Four Horsemen. I think that he is a guy that should go in there. But definitely Eric Bischoff, the guy who was the backbone of the NWO, sort of the guy signing the checks in the background, fighting sort of the fight outside of the ring against the brass of WCW, and then he did something to go down with, why somebody was getting a title shot, why NWO was, always into these big matches, why, they weren't barred from being at WCW events. Bischoff was kind of the guy that made everything make sense by being the president of WCW, but the leader of the NWO. He couldn't be fired, so on and so forth. I thought that was a pretty damn good deal. But Eric Bischoff joining the NWO class, I think that honestly, he is a great guy. We've all been listening to 83 Weeks to podcast for probably the last 2 years. I think it's been going strong. Bischoff had a podcast. It had some success. It had a pretty good long little run. But when he said that he was going to be joining up with Conrad to sort of go along with what Conrad was doing for Bruce Pritchard and the Brother Love podcast, I knew that it was only going to get better. And honestly, it's part of my weekly routine. It might not be the podcast that I listen to on Mondays when it drops, but definitely I find a way to mix it in and learn a little bit about what was going on in WCW during those Monday Night War days, whether if it's when they're ramping up to really take on the WWE, or in the dog days when WCW was kind of just all but done, but just trying to fight to stay alive. Some of those shows, honestly, are a little bit better because Bischoff has to, swallow his tail and basically say that they didn't really know what was going on. They were just trying to find a way to keep the lights on another day to try and see if they could gain some traction and go up against the WWE, which was kicking their ass at the time. Eric Bischoff's the guy that learned. He sort of snuck into the wrestling business as just a way to have a job. Keeping things going with the AWA. He's got stories about how him and his family were, pretty much homeless, sleeping on mattresses, on floors in their apartment, to basically taking a job on a whim down in WCW, where he was sort of like the fourth final guy on the roster, doing the interviews and things like that, and just sort of lucking his way into the job of being in charge of WCW, because WCW was tired of putting wrestlers in charge of the company, and they wanted something new. And even though, Bischoff came from the wrestling business, he wasn't a wrestler, and maybe he was going to see things a different way, and they believed in him. And, even though he opened up the checkbook and just basically bought every free agent there was in wrestling, every star that used to be a star in the 1980s, he was able to prove that in one way or another, Vince McMahon was wrong. Vince was throwing away guys like the Macho Man, throwing away guys like Hulk Hogan, thinking that they were too old. And, these are guys that, if you look at the WWF roster now, Hulk Hogan, when he went to WCW, was younger than what AJ Styles is today. And Vince had to realize that, maybe these guys don't move as good as they did 10 years ago, but they still have name value, and that name value means something to the wrestling fan. And, we still wanted to see our Hulk Hogan's. We still wanted to see our Macho Mans. And, maybe if they would have kept those guys booking strong through those bad days of 94, maybe those days wouldn't have been so bad, but maybe we wouldn't have had stars like Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart pop up, along the way as being sort of those main event guys, which wouldn't have led spots to Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Triple H, becoming the big stars today they are. So maybe they needed that little bit of a dive, because the one problem that WCW had with Bischoff in charge is that, they sort of had that Millionaires Club. And, it's almost like what Pillman would say back in the early days of WCW, was that he had to get a bigger contract, because if they got a bigger contract, then WCW had to use them more. And, they weren't pushing those mid-carders up to be main event guys. It was kind of like you got stuck in WCW and you couldn't move up. But one of the last guys, WWE Network, WWE made a DVD for, with a documentary. Of course, they're not on Peacock right now, but people say that everything's going to get moved over sooner than later. When the documentaries come, that's kind of when I'll be excited. But as of right now, the only way you can watch it is by popping in the DVD or the Blu-ray. But Bischoff's got a really good story. It's almost like he's removed himself from wrestling as much as he can, living out in Wyoming. If AEW calls or WWE calls, he'll take the booking. But besides for doing the podcast with Conrad, he's not really up to date on what's going on in professional wrestling, unless he really needs to be. He sort of just wants to live his family life and just sort of do what he has to do to get through another day. And he's made his money. He's done his time. Him going to the Hall of Fame, I think, honestly, is a really good deal. The fact that, he's done a few consistent bookings for AEW, showing up when they need him to. I think that's awesome for WWE to sort of look the other way. So many times, good things in wrestling don't get to happen because, guys pop up and do an episode of Dynamite as a walk-in, and sort of WWE looks at that as like holding a grudge, like you're either with us or you're against us. But, Bischoff, really, really good guy. He had a great run in WWE where he sort of just became an entertainer, didn't have anything to do with, production or anything like that. I'm sure he was a good guy in the back for people to come talk to and ask, for advice. But, just straight performer. The stuff that he did with Stone Cold Steve Austin, when, they were sort of like co-GMs of Monday Night Raw, really helped, Stone Cold Steve Austin find a second career once his actual wrestling days were done. But that run as being a GM was possibly one of the best times. He was one of the guys that stood up, sort of like it was the Vince McMahon to the early days of John Cena's run, where he was pushing guys like Chris Jericho, trying to find a way to go out there and get the title off of Cena. The storyline where he didn't want Cena to be champion didn't really make a whole lot of sense, but it is what it is. Eric Bischoff, one of the best guys there is in the wrestling business, to be able to build a machine to defeat Vince McMahon, one hell of a run with 83 weeks beating Monday Night Raw. He deserves it. I'm glad he's going in. Thanks, man. Peace out.